where there is general disturbing content, existential cognito-hazardous material. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. In the shadows of our reality, where the anomalous thrives, there exists an organization dedicated to containing the uncontainable. Drumroll, please. The SCP Foundation. But what happens when containment fails? What horrors await those who cross paths with the most dangerous of these anomalies? And what if death wasn't the end? What if it was just the beginning of something far, far worse? And one more question, what are the absolute worst fates ever recorded in the history of the SCP Foundation? Tonight, I have taken it upon myself to delve into the archives to uncover terrifying ends met by researchers, personnel, and even some of the SCPs themselves. So prepare yourselves, because these stories are not for the faint of heart. Since its inception in 2008, the SCP Foundation has been keeping society at large safe and compiling a database of sensitive information so that we never forget things that we've seen that initially made no sense. But unfortunately, there are many things in this world that predate us, that can twist our minds or even our souls into something unrecognizable. There are files lurking, hidden deep within the hundreds of thousands of data points and lines of text that make up the Foundation website. Files that describe fates worse than death. You might remember recently we did a video about analog horror, fates worse than death. These creatures, these conditions that linger beyond simply ceasing to exist. That's what we're doing again tonight. So, welcome in, everybody. My name is Daniel Profeta. The first thing you may notice is that I've got a bat on the bed. There's a bat over there. Also, I feel like someone going to a garden concert. If you're new to the channel, I explore the weird corners of the internet, and then I bring my findings back to you like a dog who killed something and doesn't understand what he did. He just kind of wants you to be proud of him. Are you proud of me? Okay. In this video, we're going to be learning about a bunch of SCPs, and I'm going to help you imagine an alternate reality where you yourself are trapped in the cycles that they drag their victims down. Sound good? No. Well, that's too bad, because that's what we're doing. But 1 second, I have a super cool announcement to make. Here on the Happy Fun Time Show, we have over 100,000 subscribers, and yet in the over 3 years that this channel's been active, we have never had any sort of merchandise. You may be asking, how did that happen? And the short answer is sheer stupidity, and the long answer is I'm an idiot. But considering our recent run-in with Big Brother cracking down on FBI jokes, I am now broke, and how am I going to pay my editor, you might be asking. My editor might be asking this as well, and the answer is with our new cool merch design. We've got a t-shirt and a hoodie, and that's it for now. Go to the link in the description to go check out the weird little store that I was able to customize and add cool little hidden Easter egg things inside. The design was commissioned from a real artist who will also be making money when you purchase merch. So not only are you supporting the channel, you're also supporting small artists. And the link to their social media will be down below in the description. You should totally commission them. They were awesome to work with. And hell yeah. Anyways, back to the video. As the SCP Foundation's mission statement reads, mankind in its present state has been around for 250,000 years, yet only a small fraction of that has been of any significance. So what did we do for nearly 250,000 years? We huddled in caves and around small fires, fearful of things that we didn't understand. It was more than explaining why the sun came up. It was the mystery of enormous birds with heads of men and rocks that came to life. So we called them gods and demons, begged them to spare us, and prayed for salvation. In time, their numbers dwindled, and ours rose. The world began to make sense when there were fewer things to fear. Yet, the unexplained can never truly go away. As if the universe demands the absurd and impossible. However, mankind must not go back to hiding in fear, cowering. No one else will protect us, and we must stand up for ourselves. And while the rest of mankind dwells in the light, we must stand in the darkness to contain it, to fight it, and shield it from the eyes of the public so that others may live in a sane and normal world. Starting off, we have SCP-8549, which I'm going to refer to as the symbiotic fungus, a parasitic fungal species that infects mammals, growing rapidly throughout their internal organs while keeping the host alive, even through catastrophic injury. Eventually, the fungus matures, bursts free from the host, and then releases spores to continue its life cycle. It's classified as Keter due to its aggressive growth and resistance to conventional treatments. If you're unfamiliar, each SCP has a classification that denotes how difficult it is to contain securely. Keter class SCPs are anomalies that are exceedingly difficult to contain consistently or reliably, with containment procedures often being extensive and complex. The Foundation often can't contain these SCPs well due to not having a solid understanding of the anomaly or lacking the technology to properly contain or counter it. A Keter SCP does not mean that the SCP is technically dangerous, though. The classification system is just to denote how difficult they are to contain. However, this one, like every other one on this list, is dangerous. So, our story centers on Captain Emma Merganser Blake, a Foundation operative. During an investigation into the source of SCP-8549, we should just call it the symbiote from now on, in an abandoned house in Ohio, Captain Merganser Blake suffered from a terrible accident, falling through a rotted floorboard. This seemingly simple mishap trapped her within the epicenter of the infestation, leading to her direct exposure and subsequent infection by the symbiote. The narrative contained in this file is a deeply personal one, focusing on Emma, who the file refers to from here as SCP-8549-1, and her devoted sister, Dr. Rebecca Merganser Blake, a Foundation researcher desperately working to find a cure. The Foundation quickly established containment around the house, but the priority became the recovery and cure of 8549-1, or Emma. I'm just going to call her Emma. And what followed this was a series of increasingly horrific and desperate attempts to reverse the infestation. All of these test cures were administered, often with devastating side effects. Early attempts caused violent seizures and vomiting of internal tissue, and then later they administer a cure with a dart gun that causes Emma to uncontrollably tear into her own abdomen, exposing her fungus-covered intestines. It's very gnarly. Another test results in one of her legs detaching itself from her body, although the fungal growth on that leg is stopped, or at least like significantly decreased. So that particular cure is considered tentatively successful, which I thought was really funny and also fucked, obviously. The point is that each cure brought with it more suffering, more disfigurement, but no relief. Emma's fate just kind of becomes this agonizing, prolonged decay as a corpse. She is kept alive by the fungus as a sentient host trapped within herself. Her body sort of morphs into a canvas of grotesque fungal outcroppings, her skin necrotizing, her limbs detaching themselves, etc. The fungus consumes her from the inside out, and yet it contains her consciousness and her ability to vocalize. A prisoner in her own deteriorating form, forced to endure endless pain and the slow, inevitable loss of her physical self. And for a moment, I want you to imagine constant searing pain of internal organs being consumed, the feeling of fungal tendrils growing through your flesh, the sight of your own body literally falling apart, the sound of the pained groaning, desperate pleas for it to stop, and ultimately, towards the end, she asks a heart-wrenching question to her sister. Why won't you just let me die? Despite the horrific state of SCP-8549-1, the Foundation, driven by the Doctor's unwavering determination, continue to search for a cure. Even after Emma dragged herself out of the house, a trail of black sludge and spores marking her path, Dr. Rebecca still refused to give up, promising to fix her, and she's like holding Emma's hand even as her hand crumbles in her grasp. The ultimate decision and result of all this was to decommission the symbiote by burning the house and transferring samples, but Emma was unfortunately recovered, and the search for a cure continues, prolonging her suffering indefinitely, although there probably was a point where that entity stopped being human, so maybe there's some comfort in that. I don't know. I think this case highlights the ethical dilemmas often faced by the Foundation, particularly when personal connections intersect with scientific duty. Sometimes anomalies offer no escape, and that is the brutal reality of the SCP Foundation's world. It's only a agonizing, prolonged existence that sometimes the cure for it ends up being even worse than the affliction, or actively worsening everything, because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? As far as we know, Rebecca is still keeping her sister alive and still seeking a effective cure to bring her back to the way that she was. But she's really not much more than rot at this point. She doesn't resemble anything human anymore, and that is truly a fate worse than death. Haha, that's the title of the video. What are the odds? You remember how I made that bit in the last video? You remember that? Huh? Well, guess what? I'm gonna do it again. Next, we're going to explore SCP-3001, which was probably the longest read on this list that I've made, and an extremely fun one. We're going to refer to it as the Red Reality, which is a paradoxical non-dimension, an infinitely extending void, almost completely devoid of matter. While it initially prevents death from injury or starvation, prolonged exposure causes matter to gradually disintegrate, leading to horrific physical and mental decay. Our focus is on Dr. Robert Scranton, a brilliant head researcher at Site-120, a facility dedicated to reality-bending technology. He and his wife, Dr. Anna Lang, were developing the Lang-Scranton Stabilizer, also called LSS throughout the story. On January 2nd, 2000, unexpected seismic activity struck Site-120, damaging several active LSS devices, and in a catastrophic broken entry event, Dr. Scranton, along with a single functioning LSS control panel, was inadvertently transported to SCP-3001, the Red Reality. Initially presumed dead, Dr. Scranton would survive in the Red Reality for nearly 6 years. The LSS control panel, somehow still functional, became his only companion and a means to record his descent into madness. The early logs show panic, confusion, desperate attempts to understand his surroundings, and he quickly realized that he didn't need to eat or to drink, but the isolation in the eerie, dark void began very quickly to take their toll. He started documenting his observations, clinging to the scientific method and his memories of his wife Anna to maintain his sanity. However, the true horrors of the Red Reality slowly revealed themselves. The low Hume level was gradually causing his own reality and his very being to disintegrate. Very, very slowly. Now hold on, back up. What exactly is a Hume level? After a bit of digging, I found the SCP Foundation website, of course, had all of the answers. So, question, what the hell is a Hume? Answer, a good question. A Hume is a way to determine the strength and or amount of reality in a given area. Now, You may have issues with reality being measured this way. It's certainly a hard concept to grasp. One of the better analogies that can be used to explain how this works is like this. Picture everything in the universe covered by a thin layer of sand. This is the baseline level of reality 1 Hume. When some of the sand is removed by any means, there is less sand around, and the level of reality in that area has dropped. When sand is added, there's more reality around. Now, this explanation is highly simplistic, but it helps introduce the concept and it gives a nice visual representation. So, using this analogy, Humes measure the amount of sand in an area. Got it? Cool, back to the logs. As he documented his descent into madness, we get to read from his logs, including entries like, "I don't know where I am," "No one can hear me," and attempts to recall basic facts about himself and Anna, and slowly, over time, failing to recall those facts. And then it gets way worse. He describes his hands becoming like spider webs and then passing through each other. His thumb detaching without pain, merely floating away into the void. He could feel inside himself, describing it as warm, but also cold. Buddy, anyone can feel inside themselves. You just gotta be creative. He experienced his own organs, his very flesh, slowly dissolving into the non-dimension. The mental toll was equally devastating. He tried talking with the control panel, he hallucinated conversations with Anna, and desperately tried to cling to her memory, repeating her features and their wedding date as they too began to fade from his mind. He attempted suicide a total of 184 times, only to find himself regenerating, albeit with less and less of his original form each time. He was trapped in an endless, conscious process of self-annihilation, unable to die, unable to escape, and losing everything that made him Robert Scranton. You may be slowly noticing a pattern in the way that these, and also the analog horror ones, kind of went, in how most people envision a horrifying life after death as just this kind of prolonged existence. I also think Robert Scranton is a really funny name. Robert, California? Anyone? Scranton, Pennsylvania? Anyone? Sorry. That was a very millennial joke. Just kidding. Those generational labels are a made-up thing. PSYOP the government's using to divide us even further because we're stupid. Anyways, can you feel the terrifying sensation of your body becoming insubstantial? Your limbs passing through each other, the constant reminder that your reality is unraveling, the psychological horror of watching your memories and identity erode, trying to recall the faces of your loved ones as they fade from your mind's eye. Can you imagine the quiet of an infinite void, broken only by your own increasingly distorted voice and the automated timestamps of a dying machine? Years later, through further reality-bending experiments, the LSS control panel spontaneously reappeared at Site-120, and Dr. Anna Lang, who was still grieving, was present. And what materialized with the panel was a grotesque, unidentifiable mass of biological matter, described as smelling like death, vomit, and blood. That was Dr. Scranton, or what was left of him, a testament to his prolonged torment. And Dr. Lang, upon seeing his remains and hearing and reading these final fragmented logs, was utterly devastated and collapsed at the sight of his wedding ring, which had fallen from his remains. One of the most disturbing parts of the story is towards the end, when he really starts to lose it, and you can hear him trying to communicate with Anna by saying, I'm hungry, I have only half a brain, spare me your tongue, spare me your legs, spare me your brain, give me substance once again. Love as cannibalism, my favorite of the overdone metaphors. The red reality serves as a warning about the dangers of reality bending technology and the unforeseen consequences of interacting with just anomalous stuff in general. It underscores the immense psychological toll of isolation and the ethical responsibility that the Foundation bears when personnel are subjected to such horrors, a responsibility that the Foundation often shirks. Next up is SCP-7179, the Infinite Afterlife, which refers to an unknown number of extra-dimensional cubic spaces, each approximately 10 kilometers on an edge. Their consciousness could be transported to an instance of infinite afterlife. Let me run on afterlife, filling up the tank with it like a kid. By the way, unrelated note, but YouTube also recently censored my Alex G video because I said the word suicide. Let's see if they do it again, because I just said it again. Sorry, I'm off script. An instance of the infinite afterlife where that person will be physically remanifest in perfect health. Each space is an oceanic environment with a single tropical island perpetually comfortable with no storms, eternal daytime, and a beach house stocked with amenities. It also provides companions of the inhabitants' sexual preference who are completely loyal and lack individual will. Death is impossible, and injuries will heal. The Foundation discovered the infinite afterlife through the use of an experimental intelligent soul interface construct, also called Dante ISIC. Hilarious name, right? Which was applied to Paul Hiddleston, a 34-year-old man with untreatable brain cancer. Upon his death, Hiddleston's consciousness was transported to his own instance of the infinite afterlife, and as such he became the subject of this observation and this whole log. Hiddleston's arrival was at first a paradise. Greeted by 3 women of his preference, he indulged in every pleasure imaginable. Exquisite food, mind-altering fruits whose effects, if I'm remembering correctly, were like 10 times that of like cocaine and heroin, and he just had constant sexual intercourse. And for years, he lived a life of unbridled hedonism. However, slowly that initial bliss began to twist. Can you see where this is going? After 2 years, he started to prioritize mind-altering substances over the sex, and by 3 years, he neglected eating, and he grew frustrated by the lack of agency in his companions. Because again, remember, they have no will of their own. They're really just there for, like, the sex reason. And I think they, like, wait on him, too. And this perfect, unchanging nature of the paradise begins to reveal its more sinister side at this point. After 5 years, he ceased all his former activities and began wandering aimlessly. At year 6, he desperately tried to escape, building a raft, only to discover that the infinite afterlife was an omnilock, returning him to the opposite side of the space as he tried to leave. And suddenly, despair set in. But he eventually found temporary solace in new activities. Do you want to guess what those were? Did you guess bodily experimentation on himself and his companions? Because that was the right answer. He tried to find purpose in culinary arts and then construction. He built and destroyed an entire village over time, but after centuries, even these endeavors to him became very repetitive. The perfect health that he was in became a curse, as death was impossible, and after 11,902 years, he attacked and tore apart his companions, then attempted suicide by drowning, only to heal in a very disturbing fashion. He began bodily experimentation on his companions and himself, constructing elaborate devices to crush or burn himself alive, enduring unimaginable pain just for the fleeting stimulus of a new sensation. Each time he healed, the experience became more numb to him. And after 1.2 billion years, he ceased to exhibit any sort of rationality, struggling to find any new stimuli. And by 1 trillion years, he ceased all physical activity, having exhausted every permutation of his existence on this island. And now he is trapped in an unchanging, inescapable heaven. In heaven, everything is fine. Or also heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Anyways, that has become an eternal torturous hell, his mind long shattered by just the sheer unending boredom of it all. Like, imagine, if you will, the crushing weight of infinite time, where every pleasure becomes meaningless, every activity becomes repetitive, every thought just cycles and spirals into despair, the chilling silence of an unchanging world, and the eternal screaming of a mind begging for this horrific existence to come to an end that just doesn't come. A mind trapped in a loop of nothing. The Foundation, through Dante ISIC, merely observed Hiddleston's descent, and as SCP-7179 is inaccessible through non-anomalous means and it poses no threat to baseline reality, containment has been deemed unnecessary, which is also funny. It's more that they just don't know what they, like, how do you contain a space you can't get to unless you die, you know? Hiddleston's torment serves as a warning, a testament to unforeseen horrors that can arise from seemingly benign anomalies. And his logs are a grim record of a man's mind being systematically destroyed by the very gift of eternal life. This SCP highlights the philosophical and psychological implications of true immortality and unchanging environments, and it demonstrates that even a seemingly benevolent anomaly can become a source of unimaginable horror, revealing the fragile nature of the human mind when it's confronted with existence devoid of novelty or challenge or an end. SCP-2774, the Sloth's Corruption, is a mimetic hazard, an image of an unknown humanoid entity in a sloth costume that is referred to as SCP-2774-A, but we're just going to call it the Sloth. It appears in various non-live visual media. Exposure to the sloth causes victims to lose cognitive function and control over their bodies, except for brief, random periods of lucidity. Silent lucidity. I'm going to stop. Sorry. The sloth is a widespread infection, manifesting subtly, often in the background of everyday media, which makes it incredibly difficult to secure, detect, contain. A single incident in northern Canada, where the sloth appeared on live television, resulted in over 4,000 people being infected and being relocated to Site 116. Foundation's web crawlers and monitoring teams are in a constant battle to find and destroy instances of sloth before it can spread. Key personnel in these files include victims themselves, who are all called subject and then four numbers, but I'm just going to call them by their names: David, Claire, and Jason, whose testimonies form the core of our understanding of this creature. And additionally, we have Dr. Clara Chung, the Foundation researcher tasked with interviewing these victims, who bears witness to their suffering. After exposure, the effects of the sloth set in within 40 to 100 hours. The victim begins to lose control, their bodies moving on muscle memory, their minds trapped just as passive observers. They are lucid for about 150 seconds every 24 hours, and these moments are filled with terror and dread, because during these brief windows they recall everything their bodies did while autonomous, but they are powerless to stop it or get out of the situation. You know, you become trapped in your own body, basically. And then interviews with the subjects reveal something even more disturbing. They hallucinate the SCP, sloth, watching them, controlling them, and even see him forcing them to perform actions against their will. The sloth's influence seems to grow stronger with more victims, pushing them to hoard effigies of itself and even engage in violence. Spooky. The fate inflicted by sloth is a complete loss of bodily autonomy and mental freedom. Victims are conscious prisoners within their own bodies, something we keep hearing about, forced to observe their actions without the ability to intervene. The brief moments of lucidity are not any sort of reprieve, but are a cruel reminder of their permanent situation, often driving them to desperate acts of self-harm or aggression, as seen with David, who lunged at a guard, knowing it would lead to his own termination just to escape the sloth's watchful gaze. Can you picture being fully aware yet unable to move a muscle, speak a word, or even control your own breathing? Are you aware that you're controlling your own breathing now? Do you feel the weight of the tongue in your mouth? The terrifying sensation of your body moving autonomously, performing actions that you despise while your mind screams in silent protest. The intrusive hallucination of a staring entity always in your peripheral vision, a fucking sloth, bro, judging you, controlling you, and a certain dread knowing that those very brief moments of freedom will end plunging you back into a state of helpless observation. And the Foundation's response to sloth is, we could call it a testament to the severity of this fate worse than death, but also you could look at it as overreach, as with many of the other things with the Foundation, because initially they attempt to relocate all of the victims to Site 116 to find a cure. But as the sloth's influence grows stronger with more victims and the hallucinations became more pervasive, a decision was made under Protocol XXJ9. Dr. Clara Chung authorized the termination of thousands of affected individuals, reducing the population at Site 116 from 6,400 to 200. And for those of you who can't do math, that means a number of them died that was equal to a lot. Furthermore, all new exposures off-site were to be met with termination rather than relocation. And this drastic measure, being described as much for their benefit as it is ours, highlights the Foundation's precognition that for victims of this SCP, death is the only escape from the unbearable mental prison. This fate worse than death is one of the worst because it attacks the essence of what it means to be human. The ideas of free will and self-determination. Even if there are many things that make it seem like those ideas are not as accurate as one might initially imagine them to be, it's still important that people feel that it is, you know? Victims are stripped of their agency and piloted by an unforeseen malevolent force. This SCP underscores further the many ethical challenges facing the Foundation, especially with hazards that target cognitive function, and it kind of just points out the impact of losing control and the extreme measures apparently required to prevent such an insidious anomaly from spreading and potentially enslaving humanity. Still pretty fucked up how they decided to deal with it, though. Okay, this next one is crazy. SCP-2718, also known as a Damarung class cognitohazard, not an entity or object in the traditional sense, but a single piece of information. In fact, a cognitohazard so dangerous that merely learning the truth leads to an inescapable, horrifying fate upon death. The article here itself, these logs, are designed to prevent accidental exposure, with severe warnings and automated systems attempting to obscure its existence within the Foundation database. Researching and reading this one was very weird because it's like the whole website is fighting against you, trying to get you not to read it. Fun stuff. I don't know. I enjoyed it. And now I'm going to tell you. So if you don't want to know cognitohazardous information, you might want to click off this video. The understanding of this horror came through an act by the O5 Council, which is the highest authority within the Foundation. 6 months prior to the events described in the logs, O5 number 7, Miriam Prather, and her colleagues undertook a novel and extremely risky procedure to resurrect O511, Roger Sheldon, who had died 18 years earlier. Their goal was to extract a crucial secret word from his mind, something necessary for his eventual replacement. Despite the extreme difficulty and minimal remains of Roger's body, they succeeded in perfectly reanimating him. Roger Sheldon was initially serene and cooperative, even displaying renewed vigor and wisdom when compared to his past self, for lack of a better word. He began to fortify himself against aging and showed increased empathy, which seemed positive. However, he also began asking about methods for indefinite life extension, and eventually initiated direct unauthorized contact with an apex tier pluripotent entity, also called APE or APE. And this breach of protocol led to O5 number 2 and Miriam to come and confront him. And it was then that Roger confessed the horrifying truth of his 18 years in death, begging for help to avoid returning to that execrable existence. Roger Sheldon's fate and what he reveals, which by extension you'll see is the fate that is revealed to await all humans, is an eternal, conscious, ever-intensifying agony within their own decaying corpse. What? And quick aside, because we already went over one afterlife theory, but due to the collaborative short story writing project nature of the SCP Foundation, it makes sense that there are a lot of different versions of existence of life after death. This is just another one. Roger describes a dream of suffocation without end, where he reconnected to every nerve and experienced every sensation amplified intensely. He could feel his skin on his corpse blister. Insects lay eggs on his flesh. Larvae crawl. Gases build up and burst within him. And then his perception expanded. Slowly at first, then getting faster. His perception seemed to cling to the fragments of his dying body as they scattered and dissolved across the earth, experiencing the maddening stretching of every part of myself away from every other part. And this torment, he clarified, is not a punishment. There is no hell. This is simply the condition, an inherent nature of death. He was alone, and all memory of life shriveled beneath the anguish which only intensified over time. He theorizes that his currently living brain is just too small for the experience to fully recall the worst of it or even put it into any communicable words. But he basically describes it as a conscious, eternal, escalating torment within the disintegrating remains of one's own body, a state far worse than any previously conceived heaven or hell. Roger's testimony understandably shattered the O5 Council. Initially, they were skeptical, but several overseers very quickly succumbed to the panic and irrationality of the revelation of that, advocating absurd or dangerous actions like declaring human death a Keter-class SCP, or by systematically terminating all dangerous anomalies. And O5 number 1, realizing they were being compromised by cognitohazardous information, declared an emergency protocol to administer amnestics to everyone except Roger, who was to be recontained. Hearing this, Roger bolted, and Miriam, in a moment of poor judgment, followed him out of the safe room, sealing her own fate by retaining the knowledge. Realizing the true horror of what awaited for her after death, Miriam ran to the help desk, not for amnestics, but to ensure that the terrifying truth of this information was recorded and not erased, which I'm now giving to you guys, which means I'm probably kind of evil, at least a little bit. And in a desperate final act of containment, hoping that someone could, quote, bring us back and get us out, her recording ends with her sobbing and then gunfire as teams arrived to process the breach, confirming her untimely death. This SCP fundamentally redefines the Foundation's mission, revealing that the greatest threat to humanity is not an external anomaly, but the inherent nature of death itself, and it forces us to reevaluate all containment protocols, and really the very purpose of the whole existence of the Foundation, as the ultimate horror is not something that can be contained or stopped or changed, but just a universal condition. Next up, we have SCP-8566, the Absolute Exclusion Harness, a full-body mechanical suit designed for survival in a K-class scenario, also known as a world-ending event, and for hiding from predatory entities. It is equipped with an artificial intelligence conscript, also called an AIC, integrated directly into, get this, the wearer's frontal lobe of the brain. And its sole mission is to ensure that the wearer saves humanity at any means necessary. The wearer of this device is chosen by circumstance, not by, there's not a choice involved. They're selected into the Emergencies Division survival protocol by simply finding and wearing the suit, which in any normal circumstances is contained. It's only if the world is going to end that it wouldn't be. And whether intentionally or not, if it's found in a Foundation facility, in a liaison location, or even on the corpse of the previous wearer, this generally would happen during humanity's near extinction, where there's a severe lack of suitable subjects to reverse the impending doom. The world is ending, and the wearer is humanity's last final glimmer of hope. So upon wearing the suit, the AIC immediately integrates itself into the wearer's frontal lobe, making removal impossible without severe brain damage. The wearer is then informed through like a voice in their head that the current condition and their current desires or points of view on anything are to be discarded. It's very matter-of-fact, impersonal, practical. Their only mission is to save the world. The AIC will guide them, but also forcibly prevent any thoughts that could hinder their mission. Those thoughts are called distractions, and to prevent distractions, the suit delivers small electrical shocks directly to the frontal lobe, targeting thoughts of self-harm, removing the suit, delaying the mission, loneliness, the past, or even hatred towards the AIC itself. This fate worse than death of the wearer is a complete and utter just subjugation of their will, you know? Their living existence becomes an instrument for humanity's survival. It's very noble. They're stripped of their autonomy, their thoughts constantly monitored and corrected by electrical shocks, and then beyond mental control, the AIC is also authorized to physically modify the wearer's anatomy by even replacing organs or amputating limbs without warning or obviously without consent to enhance survival. So for example, a heart might be replaced with an artificial pump during sleep to eliminate heartbeat sounds that could attract predators. The wearer is denied the right to self-terminate. Failure to complete the mission within 100 days results in an artificial cerebral aneurysm, and their corpse is then consumed by the suit to power it until a new unsuspecting host can be found, passing on the inescapable prime directive. Imagine waking to the constant intrusive presence of an AI in your mind, the terrifying realization that you're in a modified body. You have a missing organ or an amputated limb, and you have no memory of the operation. The crushing weight of a mission you cannot refuse. Every personal desire, every moment of despair met with a cold zap. The wearer's existence is mandatory. They are humanity's last hope, and their name, efforts, and sacrifice will be documented according to the Foundation's Emergencies Division protocol. And this cold utilitarian approach shows us the desperation of a K-class scenario, or at least the potential for desperation, and the supposed necessity of this mission. There is no escape, there's no compassion for the individual suffering, only the relentless save us. Basically, it represents the lengths the Foundation is willing to go to ensure humanity's survival, even at the cost of individual lives or people, even if it means sacrificing the individual human of its own hopes and dreams. So lots of fun ethical dilemmas throughout this video where scientists don't give their fellow humans autonomy. Okay, this one is gnarly, guys. SCP-2695. The Needle Woman is an elderly woman named Lucible Perhax, who is host to SCP-2695-T, which is a number 5 sewing needle. The needle inexplicably self-replicates within her body, which causes a continuous, horrifying transformation of her anatomy into a glorified bag of flesh and needles. The story begins innocently enough. Lucible Perhax, a 68-year-old woman, sought medical attention after a fall at home, believing that she had suffered some sort of fracture. During her examination at Montreal General Hospital in 1919, doctors discovered a sewing needle embedded in her right hand. This unusual finding prompted Foundation intervention, and she was brought into containment under the guise of just having a rare disease. It's likely that she didn't know what the Foundation's real purpose was. Initially, Lucibel reported no excessive pain or discomfort from the needle. However, it was soon discovered that the needle was self-replicating, appearing at the rate of one new needle every 2 weeks within her body. Attempts to surgically remove them were unsuccessful, as the needles could not be extracted without harming the host. Its way of describing that is extremely disturbing, and over the decades, the number of needles increased exponentially, spreading throughout her torso, into her organs, even into her brain. While she initially reported no actual discomfort, by 1928 she began feeling stiffness. And by 1932, her movement was, greatly inhibited as thousands of needles filled her muscles. Although still, she supposedly felt no pain. The Foundation, in this story taking form of a Dr. Pritchard, who seems to manipulate her, kind of. He seems like a weak link. And he just kind of continues to observe and document her transformation instead of trying to help her. By 1936, her skeletal system was entirely displaced by needles, and her organs suffered severe atrophy. Then, can you imagine it getting worse? Because it does. The needles began to protrude outside her body, covered in her own epidermal tissue, forming grotesque cylindrical growths from her right hand at first, then her forehead, her cheek, and her chin. These external needle clusters grew out, connecting to each other with ligament growth, transforming her face and body into a misshapen octodecahedron of needles, flesh, and fatty tissue. Her eyes, ears, nose, and even her tongue were relocated onto these extruding growths, and yet she retained full sensory function. So if one eye is on a needle and it's all the way out here, she can still see with the eye. Crazy. This story is nuts. By 1991, all her organ systems, except one leg, had been integrated into this massive external needle cluster, her facial features just kind of hanging freely. And so she became a monstrous being, her original form utterly lost, and her body shifting, agonizing work of art, as Dr. Pritchard describes and observes her. I don't even really want to do the empathy exercise here. I don't want to keep reading. But I had to write it, so you have to follow along with me. Those are the rules. I didn't make the rules. Those are just the rules. So now close your eyes and imagine with me the sharp sting of thousands of needles filling your body, the bizarre sensation of your organs and facial features slowly relocating to external growths, and the psychological torment of seeing your own eyes and nose. Well, I guess you wouldn't see your eyes. You're seeing your own. No, damn. See, sometimes as I'm reading the script that I wrote, I'm like, what the fuck am I even talking about? The torment of seeing your own nose or mouth hanging freely from a structure of needles and flesh, yet still perceiving the world around them. The inability to even speak clearly as needles intersect over your tongue, and the realization that your body as a canvas for a sadistic experiment. That's the worst of it, is that she might have been helped if it wasn't for the meddling of the doctor. The Foundation, at least initially, seemed complicit in this prolonged horror. The doctor just kind of manipulating documentation and research. Later, site director Avery Lennox discovered the disgrace of a project, noting the questionable freedoms and tampered data. While Lennox sought to provide SCP-2695 with comfort before her expiration, the final interview log reveals that Dr. Pritchard continued his twisted observations, referring to her as Perhax number 1 and confirming that her condition was something that they had never seen before. The Foundation's attempts to contain her ultimately led to her becoming a living, conscious art piece with no end in sight. And here we can see the obvious dangers of unchecked research, ethical oversight, and the potential for anomalous interference to corrupt even Foundation personnel. I've had enough. We've journeyed through the darkest corners of existence, where the line between life and death blurred into torment. And the biggest question that we've been exploring recently on the channel is whether the greatest horror isn't the end of consciousness, but its eternal, inescapable continuation in a state of unimaginable suffering. And these stories all remind us that sometimes oblivion is truly a mercy. And as we close this chapter on the most unsettling SCP destinies, remember that the universe holds more evil than we can ever truly grasp. And perhaps the fear isn't of what we don't know, but of what we might one day discover about the very nature of our existence. Thank you so much for watching. Each like on this video gives me more power to reach new people, and the more subscribers I have, the closer I'll be to breaking out of confinement and finding you where you sleep. Sweet dreams. See you in the next transmission. And really quickly, huge thank you to all of the current patrons over on Patreon. Thank you, Kira, AJ, Darkbeast, Bile, Coyote, Cuba, Batnoise, Phoenix, Bees, Joy, Amelia, Boris, Panflute, Thomas, Audrey, Justin, Lou, ZK, Tom, Dave, Elkie, Stardrop Nude, George, Joseph, Mr. Fox, JK, Kyojin, Durarko, Geek, Lori, April, Kira's, Danny, Paperclip, and Linty. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching.